Hello, I'm Jessica Harmsen. Thanks for joining me. This episode of The Food Quarter is coming to you from Potago Rotolo, a family-owned supplier of premium food and beverage to hospitality businesses and food-savvy locals across South Australia. They also do the odd cooking class as well. Coming up a little later in the program, we'll meet Australia's very own champagne expert. In fact, she's so highly regarded by the French, they've even given her a knighthood. First though, let's check out the culinary success of some other Aussies across the Channel in London. These enterprising expats are gradually subverting the city's tradition of poor coffee and uninspiring food. Philip Williams reports.
In a side street in central London, the coffee machine grinds and gurgles away all day. This is Lantana, one of a new breed of pioneering Australian-style cafes that are importing an experience we take for granted.
When I first came to London, I was just blown away by how difficult it was to go to a Melbourne-style cafe or an Australian-style cafe where you can just get really good coffee and good food in a casual environment.
Well, the expat crowd immediately gravitated to something familiar. Over time, the locals too have embraced this Australian style.
It's more relaxed.
The poached eggs were brilliant.
London is awash in coffee shops, mainly huge chains. But as any coffee-addicted Australian will tell you, it's slim sippins when it comes to quality, and that's where our history has given us an edge. Quality coffee is also the hallmark of the Railroad Cafe in Hackney. It's another of the Australian startups changing the face of London's cafe culture. This one in the regenerating east of the city.
The influence that's come with these pioneering Australian cafes has definitely changed the way people think about cafes and the kind of things they expect and want from a cafe, and also from coffee, obviously.
Describe the worst coffee you've ever had in England.
It was dishwater, and that's not uncommon.
Here the customers come from all backgrounds, and it's not just the way the food and coffee tastes, it's also the feel of the place. And the ultimate compliment, the copycats are busy trying to recreate a success born in a faraway land.
Well, it seems the success in the British capital isn't being replicated in our own national capital. Canberra food outlets are eyeing their bottom line as people opt to eat at home to tighten their belts. And as Kathleen Diet reports, new figures show turnover at cafes and restaurants has dropped by millions of dollars.
It's supposed to be the busiest time of day for Canberra's food retailers, but some are struggling to fill tables.
You definitely save a lot of money if you bring your lunch.
And even the regulars are tightening their belts.
They tend to be sharing smaller meals and sort of, as opposed to just ordering as they would normally, they're just watching their wallet a little bit more.
It's been unusually slow, and I think other cafes have felt that it's been unusually slow too.
The ACT recorded Australia's biggest drop in retail spending in the year to November of 1.9%. The food industry's also seen better days. Seasonally adjusted, last November's turnover for restaurants, cafes and catering services was nearly $5 million less than the previous November. That's a fall of 16% and the lowest turnover in more than 3 years.
What we're seeing is a period of declining trade in the industry, in conjunction with increasing levels of compliance, and this is causing many businesses to struggle.
Public servants usually offer steady trade for food retailers, but that's looking less certain as the federal government imposes deeper spending cuts on departments.
What we hear is that people are worried about their jobs, and when people are concerned about their jobs, they look to make savings.
Some restaurants and cafes are weathering the downturn well and keeping customers. But the industry's worried other businesses could be forced to close or lay off staff.
I think the ACT needs to look for viable options for regulatory reform.
In the meantime, businesses are hoping for a generous serve of good economic news.
Fruit and vegetable exporters say their industry is being stifled by a hike in quarantine fees. They say it's the last straw in an industry already suffering from poor seasons and the high Australian dollar. Peter McCutcheon went to the Brisbane markets to find out more.
Exporting fruit and vegetables from Australia is tough going.
How's business?
Slow.
The sector has been hit by Cyclone Yasi to the north, poor seasons to the south and a high Australian dollar.
We're an industry that's dropped in the last 10 years from 780 million down to 490 million in export sales countrywide, and yet here we are facing the possibility of more cost.
That is the cost of quarantine inspections. This service for all agricultural exports was once partly subsidised by the federal government, but the 40% rebate ended last June. The idea is to improve efficiency by allowing private sector operators to become quarantine inspectors.
You're going to get a much more competitively priced service from in the private sector.
Now, the horticultural sector has a huge array of products and a whole network of small producers. And that's why it's finding moving to this new quarantine system so difficult.
The model is really suited to large pack houses or silos or dairy factories, not to small disparate groups that we see in horticulture.
One problem is that many importing countries have yet to recognise the new private quarantine arrangement.
If, as we believe as an industry, that the importing countries are not going to accept this process, then it's a waste of time.
It has been particularly challenging with the horticulture sector, where we understand some of the dynamics in that sector.
The federal government is offering financial assistance to help horticultural exporters shift to the new system.
The Big Pineapple Tourist Park in Queensland made the fruit synonymous with the Sunshine State. But producers are finding mixing pineapple and sunshine isn't always a good cocktail. The fruit, despite being thick-skinned, can develop a nasty burn. So as Marlena Wapp reports, some producers have taken to spraying their crop with sun cream.
This might look like a routine crop spray, but this is how pineapples stay sun-smart. It's important in Yeppoon on the central Queensland coast, where temperatures have been hitting 35 degrees and above.
But the real damage is done when the pineapple gets riper and lays over like that, and then the hot sun, and that can burn within an hour.
The Sheriff family is using a wax-type product originally developed for apples in America. They say without the spray, pineapples could boil inside.
When it's really, really hot, especially after we've had rain, when the fruit softens, it's very hard to stop them from burning, but this product does help a lot.
The industry is all too aware that a large chunk of North Queensland's crop suffered from heat damage just before Christmas.
They had a lot of sunburn issues in the last couple of weeks, where unfortunately they lost a lot of their big fruit because it did lay over and it did get sunburnt. So we're being extra careful.
Over the next few weeks, about 800 tonnes of this prickly pack will be moved from unbearable conditions to fruit markets across Australia.
It's no secret that Australians love a beer and a barbie, but increasingly many of us are also partial to cracking a bottle of champagne, or as it's known in Australia, a bottle of sparkling white. What you might be interested to learn is that Australia's own champagne expert is so admired by the French, they've given her a knighthood. ABC reporter John Taylor met with Bernadette O'Shea.
You've got a pretty good job, but I think I'm coming a close second though, actually.
Her name is Bernadette O'Shea, and she's an internationally renowned champagne consultant from Brisbane.
Well, can you smell that nose now, a little smell of Vegemite?
Well, I've known Bernadette for quite some time now, and she's done a remarkable job, not just for champagne, but I think for what Bernadette thinks is the best, and that is that get people to share and enjoy the great things of life.
From florist to a champagne connoisseur. It was in the 1970s that Bernadette O'Shea fell, and fell hard, for that bubbly drink from France.
Taught myself about it, bought books and taught myself. I would buy one bottle each month. Take me a month to save up. And then taught myself about it, and then finally won an award called the Vin de Champagne Award in 1984.
It's a love that's endured, as shown by her home and her dog, who only responds to French
C'est Belcon, Minnie, Belcon.
and is named after a grape, Meunier. That romance has also blossomed into many awards, including in 1990, a French knighthood.
It was a very special moment, and it made me realise that my passion and my love and the work that I'd done was acknowledged. And it was a very tender moment, actually, but very excitable too.
I don't think there's anyone else in the world, quite frankly, who's got the same reputation throughout France as Bernadette.
Paul Boothby is the Australian representative of the champagne maker Bollinger. He says French champagne companies greatly admire the woman from Brisbane.
The house that I represent are not normally open for public visits, for instance. However, but when a friend of Bernadette goes, they're known as Bernadette's disciples.
Bernadette O'Shea now makes her living from the drink, introducing and educating others to its wonders. How do you get on with Australia's champagne, or more precisely, sparkling wine makers?
That's the word, sparkling. Very well. I think that they realise that my work I do with champagne, with real champagne, just heightens, encourages people to drink a better quality wine, and their appreciation grows, and therefore when they're not drinking the real thing, they will buy the Australian-produced sparkling wines.
The drink from a small region of France that could fit entirely within one large Australian cattle station continues to transform her life. A lavish award-winning book she's written that was rejected here has now been embraced.
It took me 5 years to write, and I loved it. It was rejected by all the publishers. People didn't think a book like that would sell. So I self-published.
And now it's going to be republished in France?
Yes, it is, which is very lovely. I was very lucky to win an award last year, the Gourmand World Awards, for the best book in the world for a French wine book. And so now a French publisher is publishing it in French, so it'll go through Europe now, which is wonderful. So if you like Pinot Noir, do you like Pinot Noir?
Yes.
So this is
but no self-respecting story about wine can be complete without a tasting. And Bernadette O'Shea is more than happy to oblige.
Do you always get excited?
I get very excited every time I drink champagne. Every time I drink champagne.
Yeah. And some stories call for journalists and media crews to go that extra mile. It's not every day that we let the people behind the camera come on the shot, but why not today?
Santé. Santé. It's got all these little bubbles. It's got wonderful texture, so it brings texture and mouthfeel to the mouth. It's very exciting. Just the very word itself, champagne, says celebration.
And sometimes sleep.
That's all from Betago Rotolo. Thanks very much for your company. I'm Jessica Harmsen. Join me next time for the Food Quarter.